It wasn't just a Monday night. It was the kind of silence that made your skin listen. The kind that doesn't sing peace. It hums warning. Rain tapped on the gas station canopy in a lazy, indifferent rhythm. The highway beside it lay still, a concrete throat waiting to shout. Light from the overhead lamps didn't glow. It hovered, sickly and yellow, like a bad memory hanging over blacktop. A silver Honda pulled into Pump 6. Its headlights flicked off, but the wait inside stayed on, and from the moment Danielle Brooks opened her door, the night began to close in. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. She didn't look like a hero. She looked like a woman who'd spent 12 hours saving lives and had 3 more waiting for her at home. Her navy scrubs were wrinkled, her bun was unraveling, and the hospital badge clipped to her chest swung like a metronome set to exhaustion. But her steps were steady, her hands unshaken. She walked like a woman who held an entire ER together, with muscle memory and sheer will. In the back seat, her son Jalen sat with his knees folded, thumbs scrolling over a spelling app, while his inhaler rested beside him like a loaded promise. He was 10, but already too familiar with waiting rooms and worried glances. His asthma made him quiet. His mind made him sharp. When his mom tapped on the window and told him to lock the doors, he didn't nod. He followed protocol. Because he knew safety wasn't guaranteed, especially not tonight. Across the lot, a police cruiser idled, with its engine humming like a warning. Inside sat 2 men who saw Danielle but not her strength. Officers Brent Holloway and Marcus Doyle. One thick with age and attitude, the other twitchy with youth and arrogance. They didn't get out quickly. They didn't need to. They moved with the ease of men who believed the law wasn't something they enforced, it was something they were. Their boots hit the pavement like verdicts. They didn't approach like law, they approached like an accusation with a badge. "Look at that," Doyle muttered, cracking his knuckles. "Scrubs and rims. Bet that car don't belong to her." Holloway laughed low. "Let's find out." Danielle saw them coming before they said a word. Her body straightened, spine instinctively bracing. She kept her hand on the gas pump, her voice calm. "Evening." Holloway didn't return the greeting. "You own this car?" he asked, scanning her not like a person but like a puzzle that didn't quite add up in his mind. "Yes," she replied evenly. "Bought it last month. Papers are in the glove box. Plates are current." She reached slowly into her scrub pocket and pulled out her license. Polite. Measured. Not afraid. Calculated. Doyle circled the car like a shark sizing up fiberglass. "We had a report," he said vaguely. "Car like this, time like this, area like this." None of it meant anything, and both of them knew it. Holloway held her ID but didn't look at it. His eyes went from her face to her shoes to the curve of the car behind her. "Funny," he said. "You don't really look like someone who drives something like this." Inside the Honda, Jalen's screen went dark. He looked up. Something in his mom's posture had changed. Her shoulders were too still, her face too quiet. He reached slowly into his backpack, pulled out his phone, and typed one sentence. "Mom's in trouble. 2 cops. HY83. He sent it to one person, Uncle Terrence. Then, without thinking, he opened the voice memo app and hit record. No one taught him that. Life had. Out at the pump, Danielle was still trying to de-escalate. "You have my ID, you can run the plates, there's no issue." Doyle stepped closer. "You got anything in that car we should know about?" Danielle's jaw tightened. "Just my son, he's 10, doing homework." Holloway leaned down, peered into the car. "That him in the back?" he said, loud enough to stir fear. Danielle nodded. "Yes, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't scare him." But the signs were already in place. A flickering maintenance sign on the gas station window said the cameras were out. The lot was quiet, and the air had changed. Danielle could feel it. She didn't need to guess. She knew. Knew the look in their eyes, knew how procedure turned to performance. knew what it meant when smiles faded and hands hovered near belts. "I'd like my ID back now," she said firmly. "There's no cause for detention." Holloway's smile was gone. "You gettin' smart with me, nurse lady?" he asked, tossing her license toward her chest like trash. It hit the ground, landing in a shallow puddle. Danielle bent to pick it up, but her knees trembled, not from fear, from fury. Doyle leaned toward the car. "Maybe she's hiding something. You keep looking at that back seat like it's carrying gold." Danielle straightened. "I'm looking at my son," she said. "He's 10, he's scared, and you're scaring him." Holloway's grin returned, only this time it looked like a crack in the ground. 10 years old? Out this late? You sure he's even yours? Inside the car, Jalen's breathing changed. Not yet wheezing, but close. His hand was already on the inhaler. Danielle's hands curled into fists at her sides. "Don't talk about my son," she said. Doyle stepped closer. "Go ahead, call somebody. Call whoever you want." Danielle reached for her phone. She never got to dial. Holloway slapped it from her hand. It clattered to the pavement, skidding under the car. "You don't make calls when you're under suspicion." "Under suspicion for what?" she asked, her voice cracking. Not from fear, but from the insult. Being tired, being black, being tired while black. That's when it happened. Fast. Holloway's hand slammed down on her shoulder, shoving her hard into the car. Doyle grabbed her arm, twisting. "Stop resisting," he barked. "Let me go. My son is watching," she cried out. "And he's sick." And from inside the car, a 10-year-old boy with asthma, recording everything, watched his mother get brutalized in front of him, and still tried not to panic, because even through the fear, he knew that if he panicked, it might give them a reason to finish what they started. And somewhere down the highway, a man with a badge and blood ties was already speeding toward a storm the night never saw coming. The inhaler hit the ground like a verdict denied. Jalen gasped, small hands fumbling, his chest rising in sharp, uneven jolts. Jalen screamed his name, tried to twist away from the office pinning her, but Doyle only yanked her back harder. Holloway sneered and slapped the inhaler away a second time, this time on purpose, like the sight of a struggling child meant nothing. Jalen's breaths came in staccato bursts, dry and desperate. His lips were tinged with panic, eyes wide, mouth forming the word "mom" without air to give it sound. Danielle's voice cracked the sky. "He can't breathe! Give him the inhaler!" But Justice didn't sleep that night. It choked on sirens that hadn't arrived, and Mercy stood on the edge of a broken curb, watching a 10-year-old boy try to survive silence. Then tires screamed like fury finding its brakes. A black SUV tore through the drizzle and slid to a stop so sharp the mist peeled back from the chrome. The headlights didn't blink. They burned through the lie. Holloway reached for his belt. Doyle flinched toward his taser, but both froze when the door opened. No shouting, no rush. Just a man stepping out into the night like Justice had grown legs. He didn't walk. He arrived. Mayor Terrence Brooks didn't need introduction, didn't need backup. His presence was the kind that reshapes a room, even outdoors. He wore a dark tailored suit that didn't wrinkle, and a face carved from granite. Every inch of him said, "This stops now." He raised a leather badge case high. The gold caught the gas station light like a blade. "Remove your hands from my sister, right now!" No one argued. They didn't dare. Holloway's hand hovered, then fell. Doyle's fingers twitched, but never closed. Danielle dropped to her knees beside Jalen, grabbing the inhaler, whispering his name through her teeth. Terrence didn't run to her. He held the scene in place, not with muscle, but with command. "She wasn't resisting," he said, voice cool and absolute. "She was surviving. What you did was a violation." Doyle tried to mumble something about a report, but Terrence cut him off without even turning. "There was no report. There was no cause. What you had was entitlement mistaken for authority." Red and blue lights finally arrived, quiet, almost reverent. 2 patrol cars eased up behind Terrence like the cavalry that should have come sooner. Doors opened. Officers stepped out. Glancing between the mayor and the chaos, "Relieve them," Terence ordered. "Now." The officers didn't hesitate. Holloway balked, yelling about politics, about family favoritism. He slammed his belt on the hood, tried to bark back control. "This is a setup," he shouted. "She played the victim card." But Terence never flinched. "Keep talking," he said, still not raising his voice. "And the next words will come from a defense attorney." Doyle's face was already drained, hands lifted uselessly as younger officers took their weapons. One wrong move and this scene would be national news by sunrise. But now the power was shifting, and not just in title. In weight. Because when Terence Brooks stepped in, it wasn't just a mayor who arrived. It was a reckoning wrapped in a suit. What if he hadn't come? What if Jalin hadn't hit send? That's what the audience would wonder, because this moment wasn't just a twist, it was a question. How many women like Jalin don't have brothers who wear power on their chest? How many kids sit in back seats with no signal, no badge, and no one arriving to say enough? The camera wasn't rolling, but the truth was. And every breath Jalin took now was a reminder that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it just shows up. The camera might have failed, but the microphone didn't. Turns out the gas station security footage was a ghost, wires loose, lens blinking dumbly into the night. But Jalin's phone had been quietly documenting everything. The slap, the wheeze, his mother's screams. The voice memos folder didn't care about broken policy or blurred authority. It just recorded. And when Terence slid into the ambulance beside his sister and nephew, Jalin whispered just one word. "Phone." He pulled it from her pocket, screen still warm, blinking red. He hit play. The sound filled the space with something sharper than video could ever show. Holloway mocking, Doyle denying, Danielle pleading, and Jalin whispering through breathless lungs. "I'm okay, Mom," even when he wasn't. The truth had weight now. Not just bruises, but a broadcast. By morning, the mayor wasn't standing in his office. He was standing in a cold, quiet conference room with the city's legal counsel and the Internal Affairs Board. No suit, no flag behind him, just a man whose blood had boiled into ice. Christopher Hall wasn't speaking as a politician now. He was a brother who'd seen his sister thrown like trash, and a leader who knew, if he didn't act, the city would burn from the inside out. He laid the phone on the table and pressed play again. The room didn't flinch. They recoiled. He didn't shout. He dissected. "This isn't misconduct," he said. "This is rot. This is what happens when silence earns pensions and cruelty gets a pass." Every sentence came clean, surgical. "We don't need new slogans, we need accountability." And by noon, 2 officers were suspended without pay. Internal review launched, and the governor's office had already left 2 voicemails. Then came the frenzy. Not a trickle, an eruption. The headlines splashed across phones and front pages like gasoline lit mid-air. "Nurse assaulted by police while child begs for inhaler." Photos of Danielle's tear-streaked face beside stills of the incident. Jalin's tiny hands reaching. Danielle's back bent against a cruiser. The hashtags roared. "Protect Black Mothers." "Justice for Jalin Reckoning." "River Hill Reckoning." Local news called it a tragic misunderstanding. National anchors called it what it was, a systemic failure caught on tape by a 10-year-old who had more presence of mind than 2 sworn officers. In America, in public, in front of her son. Words like thunder. Justice didn't just trend, it marched. And then the quiet returned. Not to the streets, not to the press rooms, but inside viewers. Because once the fire cooled, people were left with themselves, with their sons, their daughters, their late-night gas station stops and quiet thoughts they never said aloud. "How many kids," they whispered, "have learned to record before they've mastered long division? How many parents say, 'Be careful' instead of 'have fun'? How many times has survival been disguised as compliance?" The story was more than clicks now. It was a mirror, one that didn't just reflect, one that asked back. What would you have done if it were your child gripping that inhaler? The courtroom didn't creak that morning. It groaned. Not from weight, but from memory. From years of stories like Danielle's that never made it to trial, never made it past a complaint desk or a shrugged apology. The wooden benches were filled not by tourists of tragedy, but by those who'd lived it. Nurses in faded scrubs, parents gripping their kids' hands, and teenagers who'd already been told to keep their hoods down and voices low. The judge entered with a slow cadence that didn't invite respect. It demanded it. The prosecution pressed play. The audio began. Not a speech, not a scream, just facts. A woman's voice, calm. A child's breath, ragged. Officers' jokes, laced with something toxic. Each second didn't just land, it struck. No one gasped. They just tightened. Eyelids, jaws, hands. The sound wasn't theatrical, it was indicting. When Danielle took the stand, she didn't posture, she didn't perform. Her left arm was still wrapped in gauze from the bruising. Her right hand held a paper cup of water she never drank. The lawyer asked simple questions. Where were you standing? What did the officer say? What happened next? Danielle answered with the calm of someone who'd repeated the truth to herself so many times it became a prayer. I wasn't screaming because I was scared, she said. I was screaming because my son couldn't breathe, and no matter how loud I got, they treated his lungs like they were lying. Her voice didn't break. But the courtroom did. Somewhere in the back, a woman sobbed once and covered her mouth. Danielle continued. They weren't confused, they were comfortable. Comfortable enough to mock me, to strike my child. Comfortable enough to do it like they'd done it before. She didn't cry, but her stillness burned. When the jury returned, no one leaned forward. Everyone already knew. Guilty on all counts. Excessive force. Assault. Child endangerment. Abuse of power. Falsifying a report. The judge's gavel didn't thunder. It landed like a truth finally acknowledged. The courtroom didn't erupt. It exhaled. The officers didn't argue. They looked like men stripped, not of rank, but of excuse. One tried to look at Danielle. She didn't look back. Not out of contempt, out of mercy. You don't deserve my attention, her silence seemed to say. Only your consequences. The judge's closing words rang like an epitaph to a system that had long been immune to shame. You were not sentenced by evidence, he said. You were sentenced by the echoes of your own voices. Outside there were no chants, no raised fists, just people, standing, watching, listening, like they were bearing witness not just to justice, but to a shift. A nurse placed her hand over her heart. A teenager took off his headphones. A father gripped his daughter's hand just a little tighter. It wasn't celebration. It was confirmation. That something had cracked. That dignity had fought back, not with noise, but with the sharp precision of truth. And truth, when finally heard, doesn't need applause. It just needs to land. Jalen Carter didn't know it that night. But the moment his trembling fingers pressed record, he rewrote a city's future. What began as instinct, fear mixed with defiance, became legislation, signed into law just 6 weeks after the verdict. The Jalen Carter Act mandated that every traffic stop in the city must have operational body cameras, with criminal penalties for tampering or failure to record. The council chambers were full the day it passed. Not with officials in suits, but with mothers, teenagers, elders in folding chairs who knew exactly what it meant to be unseen. He didn't just press record, Mayor Hall said during the vote. He pressed the brakes on a system unchecked. Jalen sat quietly in the front row, feet swinging, badge in a glass frame clutched in his lap. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The law did that for him. Danielle didn't want a title. She wanted her life back, but when the Civilian Oversight Board formed, people looked at her like she was already holding the gavel. She hesitated. What did she know about politics? What did she know about policy? But then she thought about the nurses who wouldn't speak up, the children without uncles in high places, and the gas stations with cameras that didn't work. So she said yes, not because she was ready, but because nobody else had been. She didn't want the job, the local paper wrote. She wanted no one else to need it. At meetings, she sat quiet until she spoke, and when she spoke, people leaned in. Her voice didn't shake. Her sleeves were often rolled up, her earrings shorter. She didn't need applause. She needed laws that outlived hashtags. Brent Holloway and Marcus Doyle were sentenced without spectacle. No cameras in the room, no statement from the bench that would go viral, just time, 5 years each plus a lifetime ban from public service. But it wasn't the years that hurt them most. It was the stripping, the formal removal of their badges, their certifications, the very fabric of their authority. They didn't lose their careers, one reporter noted. They lost their camouflage. Because the badge had covered rot, and now the city could see it. In prison, they weren't officers. They were numbers. No gun, no belt, no nameplate. Just men left with their choices, echoing in the quiet of steel walls. Danielle didn't attend the sentencing. She didn't need to. The system that once failed her had finally spoken in her language, quiet, clear, unflinching. For the audience that followed this story, the payoff wasn't revenge, it was validation. That pain had a path to something bigger. That screaming into the void could echo back change. And that sometimes kindness doesn't look like mercy. Sometimes it looks like accountability wrapped in velvet gloves. The kind that doesn't strike but doesn't miss. What Jalen did, what Danielle endured, didn't just end in a courtroom or a headline. It reshaped how a city protects its people, how it listens to its children, how it values the breath between a mother's scream and a child's gasp. And in that space, so thin, so breakable, that's where truth lived. And that's where the healing started. Time has a way of testing the strength of quiet people. 3 months later, Danielle was back at Riverhill General, walking the sterile hallways in her navy scrubs like nothing had happened, even though everything had. Some patients recognized her from the news, some didn't. But no one asked, and she didn't offer. She just showed up, again and again, for the elderly man with bed sores, for the teenager trembling after surgery, for the woman in labor, screaming and scared. Danielle didn't walk like a symbol. She walked like a nurse who had charts to check, IVs to monitor, lives to steady. She wasn't the nurse who was assaulted, one of her coworkers whispered. She was the nurse who showed up again. Not because she forgot, but because healing wasn't something you waited for. It was something you gave. Yalan didn't talk much about the night anymore. Not at school. Not at therapy. Not at dinner. But it lived in the way he held doors open for strangers, the way he asked questions before making assumptions, the way he flinched slightly when a siren passed too close. He didn't draw police cars in his notebooks. He drew lungs. He wrote about breath. When asked if he wanted to be a cop one day, he shook his head. "I want to help people breathe," he said once. That's what matters. He didn't become a badge. He became a mirror, a quiet reminder that justice isn't always loud, but it must be seen. His future didn't carry vengeance. It carried clarity. He wasn't shaped by trauma. He was sharpened by it. And with every breath, he became the kind of young man a city could build around, not because of what he endured, but because of how he rose. Danielle's last patient of the night was a teenage girl with bruises that didn't come from a car accident. The girl didn't talk, just stared at the wall, like her eyes were holding something together. Danielle sat beside her, not asking, not pushing, just being. And when the girl's hand trembled, Danielle reached out and took it. "You're safe now," she said, softly, brushing the girl's hair from her cheek. "Whatever broke you didn't finish the job." The girl didn't reply, but a tear slid down, and she squeezed back. Danielle didn't offer platitudes. She didn't quote policy. She offered presence. Because sometimes the strongest voices never yell, they stitch dignity back into skin. One suture at a time, one breath at a time. And that's what Danielle did, held people together even when the world had tried to split her apart. So if this story moved you, don't just remember it, share it. Because someone out there is sitting in silence, wondering if they matter, if anyone sees them, if anyone will believe their truth. And they need to know that justice doesn't always ride in on sirens. Sometimes it walks in scrubs and holds a child's hand. Sometimes it stands in a courtroom not with anger, but with clarity. Sometimes it comes from a boy pressing record or a sister refusing to flinch. Sometimes it comes from a boy pressing record or a sister refusing to flinch. And sometimes it just needs someone, anyone, to say, I see you. Because when stories like this are spoken, they don't just echo. They reach, they restore, and they remind us that what remains after the fire isn't always ash. Sometimes it's light, quiet, steady, unshaken. Just like Danielle, just like Jalen, just like the truth. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.